Welcome to the Get in the Fight podcast. My name is Nate Whitson, and I'm the founder of Get in the Fight Ministries and our exclusive online fight club for Christian men. Everything we do here is dedicated to helping Christian men become the men that God meant for them to be. So if you're looking for helpful content and conversations that can help you to grow and become the man that God made you to be, then you're in the right place. But before we get started, please do me a huge favor and be sure to subscribe, click the like button, and then leave us a 5-star review. Doing that helps us to reach more men who are looking for content just like this. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our mission and how to get involved or how to join the Fight Club, then head on over to getinthefight.club. That's getinthefight.club and learn more today. But without further ado, it's time to get in the fight. So let's go. The pain and suffering that comes to us has a purpose in our lives. It's trying to teach us something. We should look for its lesson. I read that quote. I can't remember exactly who said it, but I thought that was really appropriate for jumping into this conversation today. It really reflects a lot of what I think we're trying to attempt today as Matt and I just share and have a conversation. But we're going to talk about some heavy stuff in this podcast today. Talk about suffering, talk about pain, and really, as we go through it, what we're looking for, what are those lessons that God is trying to speak? What are those things that we're supposed to learn, through these hard things? Today's interview is with a friend of mine named Matt Wan. Matt's an amazing guy with a story that is full of heartache and pain and suffering, but also hope and also encouragement and also faith. And so for those of you that are listening, I'm confident that in our conversations, you will see that God can use suffering and pain in your life to honor him and to keep your faith in him. And so, Matt, I'm super grateful that you would share this journey and come on here and share these conversations with us today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Really appreciate the opportunity. My wife, Megan, and I always say that we'll never turn down an opportunity to talk about Marley and to share our story. So appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I'm struck by this. So whenever we have conversations like these with people and you're just like, hey, tell me your hardest things. tell me the heartache and pain that you have. Like, it's not lost on me that this isn't just a story that's interesting, that this is your story and that this is your life and that this is very real and that it is deep and painful. But in knowing Matt and knowing this conversation that he's had with his family, I'm always encouraged that as we get into the painful side of it, that there's light through it.
Sure.
As deep as that is. And I appreciate that what you and Megan have wanted to do, like you said, is never turn down an opportunity to point people to Jesus through it. And I'm encouraged by that with you guys. And so I know that the story will do that today. We'll certainly seek to honor the Lord with this conversation. But before we jump into Marley's story, and that's really where we'll spend a lot of our time today, maybe just, Matt, take us to the beginning of your story. Tell us a little bit about you. And
okay.
Again, I know where you're from and kind of a little bit of your story growing up, but really for our audience and for those
Sure.
listening, a little bit about, where you from, what was life like for you growing up?
Okay. Yeah, I'm from a little town called Olivet, Michigan, kind of southern Michigan there, rural town. What is the population of Olivet? Probably 2,000 maybe. And that's with a small college there. And so good upbringing, as you mentioned, pain and suffering. I would say most of my life, well, really all of my life up until a few years ago, pain and suffering are probably very foreign to me. Solid upbringing. I look back at my childhood with great nostalgia and a lot of fond memories. 2-parent household. They've still married. I don't know how many years now. Probably 40 years. One older brother. Yeah, I just grew up in the country outside of Olivet. A lot of time outdoors and a lot of video games too as a kid, and and TV. Kind of indoor and outdoor kid. yeah, good friends growing up all through Olivet schools. Really enjoyed school growing up. Did pretty did pretty well. Yeah, I can't say I really faced much problems during my upbringing. Then I went
Kind
to,
of small town America, right? Like
yeah,
ideal small town America life,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, and blessed with friends that are still, childhood friends that are still really close friends to this day. In fact, just was in a wedding on Saturday for one of my good buddies from high school. And we got together. We just call them the guys, obviously. And like I was saying earlier, a little bit of, still you get together and there's just this kind of rush of excitement and the time together. So a bit of it is probably immaturity and falling back into old inside jokes and just rehashing the same stories over and over. But I'm really thankful to live near a lot of my friends from high school, and we get together quite often. So grew up in terms of like faith faith life. Was my parents are Christians. I grew up going to church quite a bit, quite regularly. We kind of bounced around to different churches when I was a kid. Still don't know exactly why, all the details on that, but it was instilled in me pretty early, the solid foundation of the truth of the gospel. I can really actually vividly remember, I must have been like 6 or 7 probably. At that time we were attending a church in Albion. I think it's a Baptist church in Albion, and my uncle Larry, who's a believer, attended the church as well, and I remember him kind of just talking with me in a room there at the church and kind of laying out the gospel and praying with me, and I prayed to receive Christ, and kind of that initial, like, expressing the faith in Christ and inviting him into my life. And so I can remember that. And then at some point a little while later, we were attending Mount Hope Church in Lansing. I remember the services there near the end. It's a massive church, big congregation, and near the end of every service, they would always invite folks up to pray to receive Christ. And I can remember distinctly also, like, when we'd approach the end of those services, I'd start getting really nervous. Like, I feel like I need to be up there, but I'm like, I'm nervous to leave my seat and go in front of all these people. And so, but I feel this pull. And then I remember one Sunday morning, I don't know, I must have been like maybe 11 or 12 at that time. That pull I just finally submitted to it, and I think I turned to my dad. I was like, I got to go up there. And so
Nice.
I just I went up to the front in front of all these people, and we prayed, asking God for forgiveness and asking Christ to come into our hearts, and I was happy, I remember, and excited, but I was at that age, I was still like really afraid of being left by my parents. I always had this weird thing about being like left alone, or afraid my parents would never come home and that sort of thing. So, like, after we said this prayer, all these people like left and they followed somebody to go get a Bible somewhere, and I just stayed right there in the very front of Mount Hope Church in front of thousands of people, and just waited until it was all over to go back to my folks. So yeah, and then at that point, I think it was really okay. I feel secure now in Christ. Like, I do believe the gospel. I believe I have eternal life. And then from that age, I didn't really actively spend any time in the Word, or spend any time seeking God. I would say, I'm a kid, an adolescent, and just kind of went with the flow into school and activities, and so it wasn't really like a daily part of my life, I would say, at that age. Went to college from 2004 to 2008. That was mainly, I would say, like a dark time in my life. I mean, certainly good memories, during that time, but very lonely. I didn't make as many friends in college. Had a couple of good buddies, and I think there was this kind of impending doom for me of like graduating from college because I never really knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life or a career. And I don't recall anybody ever really sitting down with me and talking me through that and kind of helping me figure that out. I just kind of always had I'm going to go to Michigan and I'm going to major in business and I'm going to, I always wanted to move to like New York City and just do something. It was kind of like this out there, marketing, whatever, like no idea what any of that means.
No
So,
idea.
no.
Yeah.
So college, I went to U of M and very competitive, a lot of people a lot smarter than me. So I didn't, early on, it was clear I was not going to make it into Michigan's business school. So I kind of just floated my way through college, ended up with a degree in sociology, just kind of a, liberal arts degree that I don't really even know what means.
Does that is that like what you're? Did it take you into what you're doing today or no?
Yeah, I would say it's related. I mean, because I'm in social work now, and certainly that degree has helped me to get the jobs that I've had. So then, near the end of college, there was this fear of like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to graduate and I have no idea what I'm going to do. And you got all my peers who are out doing internships and they just seem to have it, locked down. They know what they're doing and I have no idea. So then I graduated in 2008 and that was a really rough time
Yeah.
for the economy and there's a recession and all that. So out of college, I moved back home with my folks, and I got a job at Star Commonwealth in like 2000, late 2008. That didn't last long. I got laid off because of cuts just due to the economy, and that was at that age. I'm 22. I'm a grown man. I'm an adult, but like I'm still pretty young. I think mentally and emotionally. Haven't had a lot of experiences in life. Not a lot of setbacks.
Hmm.
So that was kind of crushing to me. I remember crying after that. Like, that was like I'm 22 and I've already been laid off, and I have, you know,
Living back in your parents' basement. That
yeah.
kind
And
of
I felt
dream,
this,
right?
yeah, and I felt this pressure of, oh, I've got a degree from University of Michigan. I should be super successful and all that, and I'm not.
Mhm.
So there's a low point there for sure. 2008 into 2009. Unemployed, living at home, and then it was around the middle of like summer of 2009. I was hanging out a lot with a buddy named Nate Nathaniel Byrons, and whose stepfather is a pastor, Steve Byrons, and that's when all the gospel kind of resurfaced in my life. And I distinctly remember just hanging out around the church that summer and being around older men, Steve, your dad, Jeff Whitson,
Mhm.
Coach Peters, and listening to them speak and seeing the way they carried themselves. And there was just a confidence, a joy, a stability, a sturdiness about them.
Yeah.
And that coupled with uh, I started getting in the word some more, and it just started to appeal to me. And seeing these guys, I'm like these guys have a purpose. They have a plan, and that was something I had lacked
Yeah.
mainly
Yeah.
throughout college, and so it was very appealing to me. And so I just kind of just committed, like, hey, I'm just going to read the word, and I started listening to a lot of sermons and going to church and being around other believers, and it just kind of took off from there. I would say it was a a time where God was very gracious to give me a hunger and an appetite to study the word and memorize it and store it up in my heart. And so that was kind of a launching point for getting back to being a Christian, really.
Yeah.
So that
Probably not only that even, but just not even knowing it at the time, what your how your life would change and what you're about to go
yeah,
through.
yeah, for sure.
Megan, your wife, has been through some tragic things. Like little did you know what
Hmm.
kind of stability you would need and purpose in the coming years, right?
For sure. I had no idea. I mean, I think in those early days, 2009, 10, 11, and that's when I met my wife and started dating was early 2011. I kind of always had this, and I was listening to a lot of John Piper at that time, and obviously more in Reformed theology and all that. And so I think the topic of suffering, especially with John Piper, is pretty prevalent and pervasive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I knew, like, I know suffering's coming, but it had never hit home to me. And it's kind of like, oh, I can feel like I can face it, no matter what, and I'm going to stay faithful to Christ through whatever. But I had never been tested
Yeah.
at any point up and at that point. So then my wife and I got married in 2013, and then she'd got a job in St. Joseph, Michigan, and I had been working at the church up until then, and she had a career going and all that. So after we got married and moved to St. Joe, we were there for a year, and that was another really rough. Well, I say rough, yeah, compared to what I'm going through now or what we're going through now, nothing.
Right.
But
Right.
I worked at Whirlpool Corporation at that time, and I was working in their national phone. What's the word I'm looking for? Their call center. So I'm getting taking calls all day from like angry customers and all that, and that rocked me to the core too, because now I'm dealing with angry, upset people all the time. I have up until then, I really have no ability to de-escalate or like know how to deal with difficult and angry people. And this actually really helped me in my career now. But so that was a tough time. Just I hated my job. I wanted to quit several times. Stuck with it for a year, and long story short, we missed family and friends. We weren't that far, like an hour and a half away from home, but Megan got a transfer to Lansing, and so we moved back to Marshall, bought a house in 2014. And so that's where we're still in that house. So we've kind of settled back here. Megan's from Marshall originally. And really that was a blessing moving back, because we got to spend a lot of time with our family and with Megan's family, her parents. And that was 2014, because little did we know in 2016 her mom would suddenly pass away at the age of 54. That was April of 2016. That was obviously a shock and a very difficult period. I mean, we didn't really know she had any health issues at all. And it was basically a spontaneous coronary artery dissection, basically just a heart attack that just bam one Saturday morning. And Megan was supposed to go shopping with her and had gone over to pick her up and found her mom. Yeah, there on the floor in their house. So,
One
um,
of one of the first major blows to come for you
yes,
guys.
for
Mhm.
sure. And so obviously just processing that and trying to help Megan through that. And then 3 months later, after she passed, and we had been trying to have a child through this time, leading up to that, and wasn't wasn't getting pregnant. And then 3 months after Megan's mom passed, found out Megan was pregnant for our first child. And so I was super pumped, excited. I think it was a difficult time for Megan. Like, she just lost her mom, and now here's this
Yeah.
fear of, oh, I'm gonna be a mom, and my mom's not here, and just a lot of confusion over that. Why does this have to be? And anger and all those emotions. So, and yeah, so got pregnant though, and yeah, I'm sorry, I'm taking you like step. Do you want me to keep
That's
going?
perfect. No, this is great, man. Yeah, you're actually like I've got all these like progression of questions, and you're just taking them without me even
Oh, excellent,
asking. You're,
excellent.
you're you're like right on course here, like to
Yeah.
where yes, you've got how many kids now?
Now we've got 2 children. Yep.
Two children. Okay. Tell me a little bit about, I mean, we'll get into Marley, but tell us about Marley quickly and all your family.
Okay, so Megan, and then Marley's our oldest daughter. She's 6 years old, and Selah is 3 years old. Yep.
Okay. Mar- Marley and Selah, 6 and 3.
Yep.
You guys have already been kind of rocked with just the way, like, early marriage for a lot of people, they just think it's going to be like this blissful thing, and it's some of the hardest years for a lot of people, right? Because it's just new. You move away. Even, your story is very common with a lot of people. It's like, we're only an hour and a half away, we're close, and yet you realize, yeah, we don't know anything about life,
Yep.
jobs. You're not making a lot of money typically in those early years of marriage, and
Yep.
all of a sudden you deal with some tragic blow from her walking in and finding her mom. And that just, it makes me think, it's a little bit of a caveat to the story, but just, we're talking to our young adult children now about being married in the future, and just saying, like, you have no idea the things that you will face. Like,
Yeah.
marry carefully, because
Yeah.
trusting your heart to be with somebody who might have to walk through some things like that. And again, you just have no clue. You had no clue, and God's really like re-sparking, you know, faith and dependence on Him. Just thinking, oh, good, this is just about me being a better Christian. And He's like, I'm preparing you for a storm, that
Yeah.
you just anticipate.
Yeah. It
Um,
must be human nature. I mean, for some of us to just have a certainly an idealistic idea of marriage and family, and I mean, I think you again, like when I was younger, you think, oh yeah, there might be some hard times, but
sure.
overall it's going to be great, and yeah, you have no idea what's coming. So
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. And if you are, please do us a huge favor and be sure to subscribe, click the like button, and then leave us a 5-star review. It only takes a few seconds to do this, but it makes a huge difference for us, and it helps us to reach more men who are looking for content just like this. Thanks so much for listening and helping us out. Now back to the show.
And the fact that you're listening to Piper through a lot of that, who you're right, like he really tends to deal a lot with just the suffering
mm-hmm.
of life and how to manage and handle that. Again, just like God's grace in your life to bring you along at the pace that you needed to prepare you. And yet I'm sure you didn't feel prepared at all for what was to come. And, maybe that just is a good, lead into Marley a little bit too. Tell us about, you've done a great job of kind of like setting the stage of just kind of like your progression along the way, and
Yeah.
God's grace to you there, but also not having really experienced a lot of tough times other than just, initial jobs that are no fun. And then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, you and your wife go through a devastating blow of losing a loved one unexpectedly, finding her like that. I've never talked to Megan, of course, about that, but I can't even imagine just the heartache that comes from that. Right now, you're dealing with, how do I best take care of my wife? You
Mm-hmm.
know, now you're having a baby, like just all these emotions, right? And journey. And then Marley comes along. So take us back into Marley's story a little bit. She comes along. Tell us a little bit about that, when your first child is born and the excitement of that. And
Oh
then
man.
you find out that something's wrong here.
Yeah, I mean, Marley's all through that first pregnancy, I felt super connected to Marley, in the womb, and then her birth. Yeah, it was just some of the best times of my life for sure. And then watching her be born, I was right there with the doctor and helped to deliver, and just felt super close and connected to her from the get-go. And then the first year, she was born March of 2017. First couple of years of her life were great. I mean, early on, about a year old, maybe we started to recognize, hey, she might have some delays here, not quite walking, and her language and communication skills not you might be behind. So we got involved with the through the ISD here, the early on program, and they'd come over and help, kind of assess Marley and where she's at. And about a year and a half old, I think we started doing like some more tests of, oh, maybe she has a hearing problem or a vision problem. And you just start going through all these tests and everything comes back, oh, she's fine, she's fine. Me as a dad, like I was never really worried about it because
Hmm.
this is just my daughter. I love her. She's amazing. We have great times together. Yeah, she might be a little behind, a little delayed, or whatever. Like, it'll be fine. Even if she's always behind, like, it'll be fine. And I can almost distinctly remember in like early 2019 telling somebody, like, as long as Marley's with us, I'm fine. Like,
Mhm.
whether she's special needs or has a disability or whatever. And so then it was by middle of 2019 or early 2019, I think that the testing progressed because she could walk a little bit. She could never really say too many words. She had some eye issues, some vision issues eventually, and she was in glasses, that sort of thing. And then late 2019, we had done some genetic testing, and then finally she had a brain MRI in late 2019. And I remember talking to the neurologist at that time before we had the results, and I was like, "Do you think does she have like a brain tumor or something like that?" And the neurologist was like, "No, I'm not really worried about that." And so again, I'm like, "Whew, oh, she's great."
In the clear.
Yeah, but obviously, a neurologist knows a lot more than I do about certain things that can go on with the brain. And so then December 17th, 2019, I came home from work one day, and again, I'm really not that concerned. Like, everything's gonna be fine. And anyway, Megan had gotten a call from Marley's neurologist saying that the brain MRI had showed like white matter buildup on her brain. It's also called leukodystrophy. And I think she told us to don't Google it and all that. We got to do more testing. Of course, I think we looked it up, and yeah, like, no,
Don't ever Google. Don't ever
yeah,
Google anything.
yeah. So that next month was just, well, that day that was just a massive blow, like, because then we looked up leukodystrophy, which is basically the buildup of white matter on the brain, which essentially, and again, I'm still not an expert to this day, like, this white matter builds up and it takes over the brain. And, like, obviously the brain is integral to everything that you do in your life. And so if things are building up on it and kind of destroying certain parts of the brain, that's not going to be a good outcome. So I think that was a big blow that day, like, just a shock and just crying. And we had Pastor Steve over, and yeah, so the next month was just like, I could never stop thinking about it all day. You go to
Mhm.
bed at night. I remember just having the word leukodystrophy. It would just be running through my mind as I went to bed at night, because you're constant. And at that point, okay, now we got to do more genetic testing to kind of narrow down what this might be. And that took about a month, I think, that whole process. So it's pretty a hellish month there, just worrying all the time about what the diagnosis is going to be. And then so January 28th, 2020 was when we got the call for the actual diagnosis, which was GM1 gangliosidosis type 2. So it's a rare neurodegenerative disorder, progressive, no cure. We look it up online. It's life expectancy 5 to 10 years old. Marley's about to, at that time, turn 3 in just a couple of months. And yeah, I mean, honestly, December 17th, when we were first called about the MRI, was more, I think that month prepared us for the worst news. And so, we get that diagnosis. And yeah, I think at that point, I was just kind of maybe even numb to it all, just kind of in shock. Like, how is this my life? How is this real? And at that time, Marley was really still, like, not much had changed about her
Yeah.
her temperament, her abilities. She could still walk a little bit at that point, and move around and get around. And so, and then a couple months later was the COVID pandemic. And that was actually, we look back at that now in retrospect and like, that was like a blessed time for us. That was an amazing time because up until then I work for the state of Michigan. So I'm in child welfare. I'm a CPS investigator. And so I'd have to go in the office every day, but then March, everything shuts down and we're working from home, and work is really slow at that point because there's no schools aren't in session, like nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And so we're headed into spring, and we just got to spend loads of time together, and it was like a really good time. And Marley, we just we clung to Marley during that time. Like we would hate to send her to her nap, like we never wanted to be away from her. And
Yeah.
she was just our happy kid. She's got this terrible diagnosis, but she's happy, and from the outward appearance healthy. And I'd say in those initial few months, like there was also I felt really near to God because I was thinking a lot about eternity and heaven, and
Yeah.
like they're telling me my daughter is going to die at a young age. And so the hope that I had and still have of spending eternity with her, and being grateful, like at that, like I'm grateful that like I believe Marley has eternal life. I believe that God has her in her hands. And cognitively she's not able to understand the gospel or believe, you know so it's like I'm certain, you know God has her, and she will be in his presence, for all
Yeah.
eternity. So I'm usually at my best spiritually when I'm thinking about eternity,
Yeah. Mm.
when I'm thinking about the future in heaven. So initially things good, like spiritually. As shocking as that may sound, like your kid's
Yeah.
given this diagnosis. Like I think I was good spiritually during that time because it was like an urgency of, you know, this is the hope we have given this news. And then as time goes on a little bit, and well, things have start to get worse with Marley's health and her overall well-being. 2020, June 2020, she again, I had told you she was able to walk, right? June 2020, it just kind of just stopped. Like you'd set her
Mm.
down on her feet, whereas in the past she could start walking. Now she's just not, she doesn't want to. She'll just stand there. So her balance is starting to go, her core strength is starting to go. So then she stopped walking like June of 2020, like that. Then she could still crawl a little bit, after that. And after a while, she can't crawl anymore. Just little, just overall her fine motor skills. She used to be able to grab a book and flip the pages, hold it by herself. Can't do that anymore. She's got There's like a lot of tightness that comes, tone. Her body's very stiff and tone, and like her fine motor skills are gone. And it just keeps going like that, man. Like for a while
Yeah.
there.
Where does it go from here? Like
Well,
for Marley.
like I said, it's just slowly and surely stripping away her abilities. And so in essence, whereas other parents, you're watching your child grow and progress and develop. It's been the
Mhm.
exact reverse for us. So it's very difficult for me to go back and watch like videos or look at pictures of Marley from the past couple years, because as I get closer and closer to the present, I see the loss of her skills and abilities. I was just thinking last night, like most nights we put Marley in her bed, like last year, and she'd go crazy. Like she loved being in her bed. She'd roll around and then bring herself to her knees and kind of sit up on her knees, and she'd bounce, bounce, bounce in her bed. And then it was like last September, she just slowly she stopped rolling over and getting up on her knees and bouncing. She doesn't do it anymore. She can't roll over and on her own and bring herself up to a seated position, relying more on on equipment. She has we call it her cruiser. It's like her gait trainer that we can put her in, and which is great. She can go outside and kind of slowly kind of push herself along. And it's a stroller, not, it's basically like a wheelchair that we have for her. And then other big bulky equipment for her to sit in while we feed her and all this stuff. So, loss of abilities, and then the seizures started in 2021, I'd say spring 2021. And they've gotten, initially they're really quick and she would be normally fine or sleep after them. And they've gotten progressively like harder and longer and more painful. She'll have these seizures where her face just goes beet red and her arms just go straight out, and she might stop breathing for a little bit. And so we've just been, the past couple of years, just been dealing with neurology and all the different doctors, orthopedic and palliative care, and messing with her medication, trying to figure out the right dosage and the right type and all that kind of stuff. Because seizures sometimes now she'll have seizures where she'll have them and then she'll just start crying. And then early 2022, that's when days started getting really tough, where she would cry for hours on end. Like it was like March of 2022. She'd just start crying for like literally 4, 6, 8, 10 hours. And we've taken her to the ER so many times early on with that, trying to because she can't tell us what's wrong. And so we're constantly guessing, like, what is it? Does she have an ear infection, UTI, a stomach ache? You just run through a migraine headache, and she can't tell us. And so we take her to the ER, and we'd have to explain the whole story again about what Marley's diagnosis is. And, these people have no idea what that is. And they run all these tests, and they always come back fine. Give her some strong pain meds, and then finally she'd calm down. And so we're still dealing with that these days. Just last week, a couple weeks ago, she had 6 straight days of 8 to 10 to 12 hours of crying.
Wow.
And so it's during those times where my faith is really tested, my patience is really tested, like where that anger really kind of bubbles up. Because off and on through this process, I've had these seasons or phases of anger toward God, and just questioning. And I think the main struggle has been questioning God's, like, the idea of God's justice, right? So we know God is just, and he's merciful and compassionate, and he's gracious, and all these things that we Christians talk about when we talk about the God of the Bible. And sometimes on a day-to-day basis, when I'm watching my child cry in agony for hours on end and there's no stopping it, and you try all these interventions and you have all these people praying and we've got these doctors working on it, it's not doing anything. It's like, we have nothing else, God, but you to come through right now and help this innocent little child to feel better. And I believe that, like, Marley is innocent, and I know we're all inherently sinful and born with sin innately. But again, it's like, Marley's never done anything wrong in her life. She's never done anything wrong in her life. How could she have? And you're not helping this child. Like, this doesn't seem like justice to me. Doesn't seem fair. Doesn't seem right. So certainly there's been times where I'm angry at God and I just tune him out those days. Like, I don't want to read your Bible. I don't want to talk to you.
Right.
I don't want other people to talk to me about you, especially people that they have wisdom. I know other people have wisdom and knowledge, but if you're not walking through something similar to me and you don't know what it's like to watch your child scream in agony for that long and to be given a diagnosis like this, like, I don't really need you to preach at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
about how good God is and how gracious God is. Now, I always, by God's grace, land back at that and believe and have faith that He is those things. But there are days when my experience is God's not being good right here. God's not being just right here. And then, certainly there could be something to be said with, well, is this the work of Satan? Is, and all that spiritual, the spiritual warfare stuff. And obviously I'm not get into all that now, but yeah, that's just a reality of being frustrated with God and
Yeah.
tuning Him out at certain points. And yeah, but
That's pretty real. I mean, it makes me think of when my kids get hurt. It's weird, and I'm sure that most men listening to this, I mean, this is a podcast for Christian men in particular, so I bet a lot of men listening in particular totally resonate with the anger part. Like, if my kids fall down and get hurt, my first reaction is anger.
yeah,
Not at anything in particular, but it just pisses me off.
yeah,
Like, don't want to see my kids hurt.
no,
And just to try to put myself in your shoes, for those of us listening, to try to put yourself in the shoes of a dad, for you, Matt, to watch your child suffer, watch your wife suffer, watch Selah suffer to be this other thing. And eventually I want to chat a little bit about Selah too, who doesn't usually get mentioned in the story of
sure, I
Marley.
appreciate that. Yeah.
I want to talk about her for a minute at some point, but as a dad, you're like you're like, I need to carry this. I'm the man of the house. And yet I'm so frustrated and angry. What is, you're kind of mentioning it here, but how is God helping you to deal with that anger part and that justice part? Because to me, that would be just,
Sure.
I mean, that's painful to watch you as a friend go through this.
Yeah.
What is God teaching you, I guess, through this
I,
right now?
I would say the main thing God is teaching me is gratitude toward Him, because, and God has been gracious to me in kind of revealing to me, as we go, little bits, and maybe a verse here, a verse there, or just thoughts that He gives me about, well, Matt, you wouldn't be a dad without me. You never would have been a husband. You never would have existed.
Right.
And recently for me, it kind of struck me, wait, God has given me an existence, for one, a life. He's given me millions of good moments in my life. As I was telling you earlier, like, most of my life up until Marley's issues has gone right, gone well. I've had great friends and family, and I've been just a good upbringing. Sorry, Selah's downstairs yelling for me. You've given me millions and millions of great moments. You've allowed me to be a husband, allowed me to be a father. Like, I never would have held Marley, never would have spent a millisecond with her, let alone now over 6 years, and over 3 years with Selah, over 12 years with Megan. I wasn't guaranteed any of those. I wasn't owed that. I wasn't entitled to that. So these are some thoughts that God has given me, and is also, like, I try to incorporate into my daily life, of reminding myself of really how blessed I am, and how good He's been to me, and how I wasn't entitled to that. Because I think in general, we're all sinful, fallen human beings. Like, I think we have a sense of entitlement in life. We that's just our nature. And we all always, of course, we want things to go well in our life. We want to be comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just human nature. Like, of course, you want things to go well, but when you do go through tough times, like, I think part of the key to making it through, and is to be grateful and look back at all the things God has done for you, and will continue to do. Like, even today, like, Marley's could be having a bad day today. Like, I mean, sun's still shining. Like, I have fresh air to breathe. Like, I have a lot of things that are still going well in my life.
Mm.
So gratitude is the biggest thing, I think, that He's teaching me, and just how dependent we are on Him. Like, again, I can't stress it enough. Like, I wouldn't have an existence without Him. So who am I really, really, who am I to complain to him or to be angry with the one who has allowed me to have everything that I have in my entire life, and who has, on top of all that, has forgiven me of my sin and has secured a glorious future, I believe, with my family, with him in heaven, and is allowing me. It's only because of him that I have been able to know Marley now for 6 years and will know her and cherish her and spend time with her for all eternity. So,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah, glory.
yeah, in my best days, those are the thoughts,
Right.
and then there'll be a day where, but again, sometimes that's all about me. So I'm like, oh man, you've been so good to me and gracious to me, and things have gone well for me. And so I can get this gratitude and kind of even, feel it viscerally, and it improves my life. But then if, again, I go back to watching Marley suffer and cry for hours and hours, like I still sometimes struggle, but be good to her. Like you're not being good to her right now. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so there's always this fight.
Roller coaster,
Yeah.
right? Just a major roller coaster that you're on. But man, what you're saying is so incredibly powerful. We had talked about in the beginning, I read that quote about pain and suffering comes with a purpose, and our
Mm-hmm.
job is to look for the lessons. These are lessons that we would rather not learn,
Yeah.
that we would learn through hearing your story, but not have to go through it ourselves. And yet the scriptures are pretty clear that you will suffer in this life
Yeah.
and it will be different, right? And yet I hope that one of the things that God speaks to us as we hear your story is, we mentioned in the very beginning that we're going to talk about pain and suffering, but also hope and encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes me think of a couple things. Number one, just the gratitude that you can express in the midst of such pain as a dad and a husband is super powerful, and how little most of our troubles are if we were to compare what you're struggling with, what you guys deal with, that ought to encourage us as listeners to your story to say, is what you're dealing with as bad as what Matt's going through? I think you can get through this, right? There are people that are always suffering in ways more profound than yours,
Yeah. But the same is true for us. And I mean, there's always somebody out there who has it worse than you. I mean, there's families all around the world that have kiddos with GM1 and other, you know, terrible diagnoses who are living in third world countries who, we thankfully have access to all the
Yeah.
healthcare resources. And Marley's on the ketogenic diet, she has a dietitian, and all these people, like there's kiddos over there. I remember like Megan has been connected to a family, I think in Poland or Ukraine, who were in that area, who are like fleeing, and like they don't have any of the reason, and they have a kid with GM1 who's going through the same stuff, and they might not have a stable home. And so there's always somebody out there who has it worse. And so those are thoughts that I think of sometime as well, to kind of like, wow, God has been really good to us in terms of
Yeah.
all we have here, the resources we have here.
No.
I'd say another lesson, Nate, that I've learned is, and I'd be remiss to not talk about, is the power of community, for sure. Because our small group community, our church community, like you all have been terrific to us, like frequently reaching out, asking how we're doing, praying for us, bringing us food. Just on the days Marley's crying a lot, like people from our small group, they'll come over and just sit with us, just sit with Marley, to allow us to take a little break. There's no way to get through something like this
Mm.
without like-minded individuals who you have that genuine understanding and connection with, mainly for us because of our mutual faith. But yeah, like we were talking earlier, we're meant for community. And if you're going to try to isolate during a season like this, like it's not going to go well for you, probably. So
you're, you're in trouble. And really, it's the enemy's tactic is to, whether it's sickness or health or just through distraction, he'll find some way to try to get you away from community and away from Christ,
yeah,
because he knows there's strength in that. And so, yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that. It's obviously in this Get in the Fight ministry is geared towards helping Christian men find that community, partly because we just don't know what we're going to be facing in life.
Yeah.
And before, like, where I feel like for a lot of people we go wrong is we wait till we're in the storm and then go, I need some community. Like,
Yeah.
now I got to find it. You know, as God was preparing you for your journey that you're still in, you know, you didn't know what you were to face, and we don't know what we're to face,
Mm-hmm.
but we can be honest with life and look at life honestly. You know, we're studying through Ecclesiastes, and in our fight club, we do devotions each morning together, and we're talking through, like, the Bible's like, look, be wise to how life really is. You have no idea how it's going to go. It's not fair,
Yep.
and it's better to consider death than it is to be at parties.
Mm.
Why? Well, because that's real life. And in fact, you had mentioned earlier that when you think of the future, you are at the most peace. That's what the wisdom of God gives us. And it comes through, again, community and being in God's word. And so, you know, before the hammer drops,
Yeah.
because this life will hit you at some point, you're going to suffer.
Yeah.
It's going to, you need to be surrounded by community.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a weird dichotomy actually. Like I said, I'm at my best when I'm thinking about the future in eternity, like in God's kingdom. But then I'm also at my best when I'm thinking about the present, and verses that I frequently reference in my head every day. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a
Mm.
day may bring.
Like,
Every day
good.
I'm telling myself pretty much like we're all in the same boat. Nobody knows, no parent knows how much time left they have with their child. Like, you
That's
could
right.
you could go out for a country drive today and not make it home. Every day I
That's right.
tell myself like I could go to bed tonight and not wake up tomorrow. So just try to be present, try to be grateful for the day, because I'm not promised tomorrow. So
Yeah, it makes me go back again to Ecclesiastes. Everybody needs to spend some time there, because the wisdom of Solomon at the end of his life, having had everything,
mhm,
he says, like, enjoy exactly what you said. Be aware of how this life goes, and it's brief, and you have no idea if it's going to go well or not. So he actually says, because that's true, enjoy today. Be fully focused on today.
yeah,
Enjoy your meals, enjoy your drink, enjoy your wife of your youth. Like, these are all rewards and gifts
mhm,
because life is hard.
yeah,
So, like, when you get a moment to enjoy the sunshine or a few minutes to have a conversation with a friend, those are the gifts.
yeah, for
You know,
sure.
it's not the wealth, it's not the stuff you'll store up or leave behind. It's each moment with your kids and your wife. You had a great meal, go enjoy it,
Mhm,
because you don't know about tomorrow. So don't boast about that. And just the wisdom that God gives us to go through life is very profound, and just ultimately always proves true.
for sure. Yeah.
I had a question for you that I think would be helpful for us as listeners. And I have wondered this. I had a friend, some of you would know, Todd Page, who has a special needs child.
Mhm,
And being close to that family for many years has helped me to, maybe I think, have a decent understanding of what the family goes through when they have a special needs child,
mhm,
because we just don't know how to respond to it,
mm,
you know? So as a dad, dealing with, just, you know, Marley might yell out or scream or make sounds. It makes people around you like, I don't know how to, like, do I
yeah.
look at them? Do I, like, how do I, number one, like, how should we respond for those of us listening? And what's helpful or not helpful for families with special needs kids?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's only natural, like if you're in a public setting, obviously, if a kid shrieks or makes a loud noise, like somebody's probably gonna jump and look, and that's fine. I think if you're gonna look and maybe stare a little bit. I guess one thing would be helpful in that instance, just give them a smile. Just give them a smile. Like if obviously you catch on, oh, it's a special needs kid and all that. I'd also say like when you see children with disabilities and their families around, I understand it can be you don't know what to say, you don't know how to interact, and so some people might just shy away and not say anything. But yeah, be confident, be fine to come up and if you don't know the child or the family, hi, my name's Matt. What's your name? How are you guys doing today? Like, and that's not everybody's personality, but um,
Sure.
if you are in that position to just treat them like a person, and ask them. And Marley's nonverbal, and a lot of these kids are nonverbal, but I still, I'll do it myself, like still come up and ask them questions. And usually, obviously, the parents will chime in and oh, his name's so and so and all that, So that's what I'd say in terms of
Anything that's not helpful that people do that you go, God, that drives me nuts.
Well, this one could be sensitive, but like I can tell you from my own personal experience as
Sure.
a man, what I appreciate from other men is, especially my close friends, is reaching out to try to make time to hang out. Because sometimes, Megan needs a break, obviously. I need a break, and just an outlet of doing something else rather than the heaviness and the seriousness of our lives. So trying to make plans to do something fun or just hang out and talk, just like normal. Or I appreciate when I get texts from guys like that are just like, "Hey man, praying for Marley today," or "Hey, how's Marley doing?" I like when people ask me about Marley and like say that they're praying for Marley. That's just me personally. One thing that we have struggled with, I would say Megan and I, especially, not to single her out. Men and women are just different. They're just different. Okay. It's
Yep.
okay to say that, I think.
Absolutely. At least on this podcast, 100%.
Yeah. Women, there are some amazing women in our church. And yeah, I'll just say that, amazing women in our church. And they have great intentions. I'd say most of these, Christian women for sure. But a woman's life, and especially Megan's, is so, their thought life is so heavy. It's so serious all the time. And that's true of whether you have a special needs kid or not, I'd say. Like, because you have children, they're planning, they're preparing, they're thinking, they have a billion thoughts on their mind. Whereas I told Megan recently, like, she was struggling with all these thoughts. I was like, "Megan, you know what I thought about today? I thought about hockey. That was it." I was thinking about hockey that day. One thing. So women will reach out and they get in these long text conversations that just go on in these threads, and then they worry about how they respond and how that's perceived, and did they respond timely, and what that other woman's thinking, and on and on and on. And it's just, sometimes it's the long drawn out spiritual text message conversation where, I don't know, it's felt like for Megan that she's being, like I was mentioning earlier, like basically like God is so gracious and so good and da 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 da. Whereas that, in Megan's experience that day, that was not the case at all. Like, and this person has no idea that she just spent 6 hours with a crying kid today, also
Right.
on the phone with neurology multiple times and palliative care, and on and on and on, scheduling appointments and all this. Like, by the end of the day, it didn't feel like God was good today. And so it feels like being preached at.
Yeah.
It's felt like at times like Job's friends, sometimes where people want to impart their knowledge and their wisdom about God when they have no reference point for, maybe they've never actually experienced anything close to what we're experiencing. And if you were watching your child suffer in the manner that we are, you might not be as strong as you think you are,
Yeah.
and you might be singing a different tune. Um, I said it before, like we've even had family who are older Christians they're lovely people, but they can come off very judgmental and critical, and have even like been critical of us that we are not using this Marley's story and her platform enough for God's glory and to point people to Him.
You're like, bro, I'm just trying to breathe
Yeah,
today.
one, I'm trying to survive, and also, like, actually, I felt like, and you've been to Marley's, you were participated in Marley's walk this past fall, her event, Marley's Miracle Mile. Did that not feel, that was like a sermon, that was a whole service
Incredible.
dedicated toward to God, really, not to Marley. And these are the same people who, the people that accused us or kind of were critical of us, like they've never even been to one of Marley's walks. Like they're not
Yeah.
seeing all the things that we do on a daily basis or the conversations we've had. I've witnessed to doctors at U of M, very highly educated, you know, geneticists and neurologists who have been able to share the hope that we have through Christ, for Marley's future and eternity. Like, and so, like, who are you to
Mm.
criticize how we're handling this
Job's
situation?
friends.
Yeah.
You're right,
When
man.
you've not experienced anything remotely close, until you watch your child basically die in front of you over these
Yeah.
past few years, like, don't come to me with that because you have no idea what you're talking about.
I do think it's part of what those of us on the outside who really do care for our friends who are hurting and dealing with this, because it's kind of like where I think a lot of us are so aware actually that we don't know how to relate, that causes us to say nothing at all. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? Because we know it could be hurtful to say something, even if it's true, like God has this or he's with
Mm,
you. Like it's not always helpful. And so like when we know these stories, we're thinking, well, yeah, I don't want to add to it. So I just say nothing. And then I think it can cause those of you who are struggling, like, please just treat me like a normal human.
yeah.
It's such an odd thing at times because you don't want to say the wrong thing, but you also
Yeah. I would say take a leap of faith and say something because especially if you have a long history with that person and that family and you've known them and spent a great deal of time with them, because that's another one of my experience of yeah, I have some friends from the past who spent a great deal of time with, and it's felt like a like a severed relationship where like literally after all these years, like this, and what Marley's going through and what we're going through, and they literally never said anything to us
yeah,
or to me, and that's been kind of hurtful. But that's just,
yeah.
I'm just being honest.
No, it's super helpful to hear from you on that because I do think in a really practical way, people care, and they want to be helpful. Sometimes it comes off as not helpful, and that's just a journey that you and Megan have to deal with, and families have to deal with. To go like, okay, I bet they didn't mean it.
Yeah.
They're ignorant, and you have to deal with that. But it's also just one more thing that you have to deal with, and that's frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just say take a leap of faith, and if just say something.
Yeah,
Be a friend to somebody who's hurting and just reach out. What's the worst that can happen if you do say something wrong, or you know what's
yeah.
the worst that happens? I mean,
Take,
the per
take a chance not going well versus saying nothing.
yeah. I mean, the person, if you do say something wrong, like, we probably understand, like, you have no frame of reference for this, so that's you know probably why you weren't able to articulate it the exact way that you wanted to. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's helpful. Tell me, tell me really quickly of what do you pray for? Like, is where you stand today with Marley? What are the things you pray about in terms of Marley? What would you ask people to pray for when it
Yeah.
comes to your story?
Well, admittedly, I've never been a strong prayer. So in my own personal prayers, I mean, I try every day to, like, I'm praying for God's, peace to be upon Megan, and God's spirit to be upon my family members, and I'm praying if Marley's off to school, just help her to have fun today, help her have a good day with her friends. Those daily prayers of, like, just mainly God's presence with them and peace upon them. For Marley, for sure. I mean, we're still praying for a cure. I mean, there's clinical trials going on and companies that are actively working on treatments and a cure for GM1, and there's a lot of promising stuff going on, but it just takes so much time with FDA approval process and all that. So that's still something we pray for, and would love for other people to pray, is like all these biotech companies and the people that work in these positions, like, these are all people created by God who have skills and abilities and wonderful talents to be able to help the whole world, and also God's people, who are struggling with certain maladies and diseases. So pray for a cure. And that's why we still do Marley's Miracle Mile event, which will be in September, and other things we do to try to raise awareness about GM1 and to raise money for the Cure GM1 Foundation to try to help expedite treatments, and cures. So yeah, we always appreciate prayers for
Yeah.
that. I'm trying to think. I mean, really for Marley, like all of us, like life can be, the simple things in life are the best thing. Like Marley loves going to school and seeing her friends and her teachers. She rides. She has like a hippotherapy, so it's therapeutic horseback riding, and so that's another simple joy. She loves just being outside. We walking through our neighborhood on her little gate trainer and going for stroller rides. And so for the simple things, a lot of the times, like if Marley's having a stretch of really bad days, like we can't do any of those things. Like she can't even go to school. Like really, she can't go to school. She can't. She's screaming for hours. We can't go outside, and like, so when we do have good days, it's just such gratitude for just those simple joys in life. So
A
prayer,
lot to be learned about this.
yeah.
All of us, right? As I listen to it, I'm thinking, man, that's just true for all of us.
Yeah. So always prayers for Marley, just to be able to enjoy the simple things in her life. Yeah, and then also, I mean, it's clear to me through this process that platform we have, just because of Marley's story, I do believe that God is and will continue to draw people into the kingdom just based on Marley's story, the joy she lives with, the who she is as a person, as well as our testimony and witness through it. And so praying that, yeah, that more and more people will be drawn to the kingdom because of Marley. Yeah.
There's a quote I wrote down here that kind of makes me think of this, that C.S. Lewis said, who we all love and quote. We probably rarely read that. Actually, his books he wrote.
Yeah.
But he said this: pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our consciences, but shouts to us in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And that really just kind of goes with what you're saying there. That's such a beautiful thing to ask for in prayer, that you're mentioning there, that God would use that megaphone of pain to bring thoughts of what's to come. I love what you said earlier today too, and I'm so with you, man. Like, death does not have the final call here.
Yeah.
This disease, this GM1 does not have the final say in what's to come forever and ever and ever. I just believe that for her, for me, for you. Like, death has a sting, but not for believers. It's just a sting, I guess I should say. It does. It is painful. What you're dealing with is, but painful is not even the right word, right? Like, there's no word to describe it, but it's not to stay forever.
Yeah.
And God uses pain to rouse a deaf world who's trying to, go through all this stuff to find pleasure in every other way. And yet what you're describing so great for us today is, again, I'm just amazed at, like, as I'm reading through and studying Ecclesiastes and talking in our fight club about it too, this is exactly what the wisdom of God's word has always been telling us. Enjoy the moment. The little things are the gift. That is life, the best of life. Sunshine on your face right now. You're going to get to go hug your kids here in just a second when I let you go, right? Like, don't miss what life really is about.
Yeah.
That community, those people, that wife, and use pain not to bring you down, but to realize, like, we have a lot to be grateful for of what's to come.
Yeah, and inevitably, I mean, on certain days, again, it will bring you down. But if you can find your way back to that gratitude aspect. And yeah, just recognizing again, as you just said, the sunshine on my face today, and hugging my kids. I was not guaranteed that today, and that's a great gift from God that I have, today. So yeah, Bible says this light momentary affliction is preparing for us a weight of glory beyond all comparison. That's another verse that's been, it doesn't feel light and momentary some days, but
Right.
I think about it, man. I was just describing earlier in this podcast, I was taking you through my childhood and all up, and graduating from college in 2008, that was what, 15 years ago. And that flew by, and I'm 37 now, and I'm going to be in just in a minute, I'll be 47, I'll almost be 50. And we all know as we get older, it flies by. So keep the focus on the here and now, the daily present of those gifts that God's given you, how he's been gracious to you. And then also on the promises of eternity. And that, I think that's the key to getting you through, and then staying in your community
Yeah.
and not isolating. Those are the keys to making it through times of suffering. And I'm not saying we're through it now. It's
Right.
just day by day, and none of us really know what tomorrow will bring. So
Yeah. One of the things that we pray about each day, there's four principles that we talk about in our ministry, that God would make us men of honor, men of discipline, men of strength, and men of joy. And what we talk about with joy and pray for every day is that God would help us to have joy, which is different than happiness. It's connected but different. Joy and all these things that we're talking about, what's to come and who God is and what he's done, but joy that's not dependent on our circumstances or feelings is part of how we pray that prayer every day. And it's amazing how difficult, of the four principles that we pray about, honor, discipline, and strength, how you can kind of push through some of those and just kind of like muscle up a little bit to just do the hard right thing, or to find strength in the relationship or whatever it is. But the thing that you can't manufacture, that you need God to really do in your heart, is to give you joy despite how you feel. And so that's one of those things that we fight for in our ministry every day. And it takes just great courage, which is why we pray through our main core scripture is 1 Corinthians 16, 13, and 14. And when it says there to be alert, like what is happening? What does the devil want to do to you today, Matt? You got to be alert every single day. You got to wake up, because you never know, like in your story or mine, every day something could happen and you've got to be alert. Like, what's the tactic to bring me? What is the scheme that he's doing to hurt me? To get in the way? Is Megan all of a sudden upset and you're like spin it out of control? Or do you go, oh, I'm alert. I know what's happening. I'm not going to let that happen. Anyways, he says, be alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, which is usually translated to be men of courage. And I think it's like how much courage it takes for you on a day-to-day basis, right? To be strong, do everything in love. Powerful stuff we pray through, but it takes a work of God in our lives to live out that core. And it takes a real man to be able to wake up every day and do that. And so we are going to be praying for you guys, in this way in our fight club, but that you also would be a man of, honor, discipline, strength, and then joy. And then that's just a powerful verse to pray through as well. 1 Corinthians 16,
awesome,
13,
man.
and 14.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, and I won't take up a lot more of your time, but I do want to talk about Selah for just a minute.
Sure.
How does Selah, like, my guess from the outside is like, oh man, like we forget about Selah, and this precious little kid who grows up with a sister who's older, she's only 3. But talk about Selah for a minute and how you're parenting her, or how it's affected your parenting with her, or just what comes to your mind with her. I'm curious of how this works with Selah.
I really appreciate that question. Yeah, Selah's she's an amazing kid. She really is. She's had to grow up really fast. She's super intelligent. I mean, most parents will probably say that about their kid, but like she just is. Like she seems advanced for her years. I mean, even when she was 2, I think she knew when Marley was having a seizure, and she would go and get a chewy for Marley, because she has these things she likes to chew on, and like she's very helpful, and she is alert, like she knows what's going on all the time with Marley's health, with the spiritual and emotional temperature of our home, for better or worse, like because there are days in this house where it is very stressful.
Sure.
And so we do worry about Selah's, her emotional life, because I think she might have the tendency to, she wants to she wants to be good all the time, right? Because we have a lot going on, and she wants to be helpful and good. And so I think she might have this air of like being a perfectionist, maybe, like, because we need her to help a lot. And so then I think she might bottle things up, and then it just boils. I mean, she is 3 after all. Then it just boils over, eventually, and she'll have a meltdown. But the things, Selah is hilarious. Like, she is just what we needed in our family in terms of like humor and to lighten the mood, because she says some hilarious things. I wish I wasn't on my phone recording now, because I have like a running list in my notes of just hilarious things Selah has said. Gosh, I wish I had one to pull right now. What was it? A couple months ago on one of our vacations, out of the blue, she goes, "Dad, what do you think baby Jesus is doing today? Rolling over?" Just
Hilarious, man. The mind of a 3-year-old.
yeah. Oh man.
Rolling
Yeah.
over. Yeah, that's probably it. That's probably what it is.
A couple weeks ago, we were kind of talking to her about strangers, like stranger danger, and if the hypothetical, if this strange man tries to give you candy to get in his car, don't go. So then we're eating dinner on the front porch, and this just a guy in a truck drives by, and she looks at him, looks at me, and she goes, "He didn't try to give me candy. Woo, that was a close one." Yeah.
Woo, close one.
Yeah.
Close call.
So she's hilarious and
I
really helps
love
with that, and then very helpful around the house. But then she's 3, and like, terrible twos, and then 3 happen, and she's, we call her a 3-nager, because just, and it's been a struggle, because Marley was delayed and had these issues. So really, Selah going through these ages and stages is really our first time of dealing with some of these behaviors and the manipulation tactics they'll try and all this stuff. So it's been challenging to deal with some of that. And I think as I'm learning, Megan's learning, a lot of the key with that is taking a deep breath, trying to slow down, get on her level.
That's right.
Eye contact and do all that. But when you're on the day-to-day and you're on the go, and I think in our own natural little habitats, we are all comfortable, and we can just kind of just spout off at the mouth, and we're very reactionary. And so that's something we're learning, just trying to be slower to speak and all that stuff. But we're super thankful for Selah, and I am excited to see, how God's going to use her moving through her life, because I won't be surprised at all if she ends up being a nurse, being a doctor, being somebody who's in the field of serving others and helping, being a teacher or something like that. She's a great kid.
Yeah, what a blessing Selah is. I'm glad we can chat about her for a minute and just let people know about Selah too, because what a gift she is to your family. I mean, I didn't realize she's that funny, and I'd love to see the list of the rest of it. But what a gift. I mean, God knows. He just knows what you need. And we'll be praying for Selah too, and just for you guys. I mean, 3-year-old is just fun anyways and challenging, but on top of the rest of it, to make sure that she and her heart, that God just blesses her too in her little life and uses it. And I know that He will.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So we'll kind of wrap up here, but I know that a lot of guys listening, Matt, are going to want to know, like, we already talked a little bit about praying what you're praying for and how we can pray. What can they do? If they're like, what else can I, like, how can I help this family? What would you suggest? Is there anything else that you would suggest that guys, if they say like, I want to help, or maybe help families that are dealing with the GM1,
Mm,
what can they do?
yeah. Well, I would say one, again, we've been blessed with a lot of support. So, I mean, honestly, sometimes we're overwhelmed with the support in terms of like, I don't feel like we deserve all this attention and this help. And sometimes I feel like there's other families even in our little community who have children with disabilities, and like we feel like they're being overlooked because so many people are looking to help us. So yeah, we have a lot of support. I mean, find if there's other folks and whoever's listening in your community of people who have children with disabilities and are going through great suffering, reach out to them, send a quick text. Hey, if it's somebody close, like, hey man, love you, praying for you today. Simple stuff like that. I know people a lot of time will ask like, how can I help? And then I think we've all had that where we're going through a period of tough times and people ask, how can I help? And we don't know, like, I don't know how you can help.
Yeah.
So sometimes the best thing is to just say, I love you. I'm
Yeah.
praying for you. Yeah. Like, how are you doing today? And sometimes a text, sometimes texts are like brutal, like, whereas like just pick up the phone and call them,
Mhm.
or look for an opportunity to meet face to face. Specifically for GM1, anybody listening, you can go to curegm1.org to learn more about the disease and to, if it's on your heart, to donate toward a cure. And there's a whole umbrella of these diseases. They're called lysosomal storage disorders. There's all these different. There's so many, pediatric, genetic disorders and diseases. So, but just, really it's about your context and the people in your life. Everybody's got suffering. Somebody's marriage might be falling apart. Somebody's
Yeah.
might be struggling financially. The list goes on and on. And I think the key when approaching anybody who's suffering, whether it's with a child or just in a different area of their life, is like, be genuine with them, be real. Don't try to preach at them. They may be in a position where they just, if you're going to try to preach the gospel to them or preach about how how good God is, they might not be feeling it that day, and it's going to turn them off actually. So be like, the Bible says we are the hands and feet of Christ. So a lot of times it can just be your actions, just your presence with them. Like, that demonstrates God's love and care for them by you just being with them and you know being genuine with them, and realize that people that are going through suffering, they're going to have days where we're just angry and we're going to vent and be upset and maybe be upset with God. It's okay to just listen and allow them to be that way, because like, God doesn't need you to defend him. Like, he can
Mhm.
handle it. He can handle, you know, when I'm frustrated with him. Certainly Job and King David and all these people through the Bible, like, he's dealt with enough people who have
Yeah.
gone through suffering. He knows how to deal with them. So you don't have to
Yeah.
defend God. Sit with the person, listen to them. If it's something you can validate about their situation or relate to them, at a appropriate opportunity, you know, you can share or validate or whatever. But yeah, those are just some of the things I'd say.
It's so great, man. I go back to that opening quote and just talking about suffering has purpose and there's lessons that we need to look through in it. And I feel like you gave us, there's so many things. There's so many things rattling in my head here that I just so appreciate. But I want to thank you for just, again, talking about something like this is just, I don't know if it's hard or easy for you, but I know it's hard to hear it. It's hard in that way of just like, I don't like watching people suffer and hurt. And yet you do an amazing job. You and Megan both have done an amazing job, despite what some people in your family or close circle might say, of demonstrating Christ in a very honest way. I appreciate that about you guys, that it's very honest. Like, hey, some days I'm just very angry,
Yeah.
and some days I do fine. And yet it's clear to me, and it's clear, I'm sure, to everybody listening, that you put your trust in the Lord, and that you believe that this isn't the only story that will be told in your story or in Marley's, and that your hope is there. And that's where we want to point people to in this podcast and in this ministry, is to make much of Jesus.
Yeah.
And he can do that. We can do that through pain and suffering. And you guys are doing an amazing job. And I just want you to know that people do care, and we're praying for you guys. And I'll be sure to mention in the show notes in different places that curegm1.org, great place to go. And even just the practical lesson that you talk about of practicing gratitude in the midst of what you're dealing with, but also just very practically to send a text. I mean, those are things that men can do. I think a lot of us men listening are probably just like, I don't know what to do, and so we do nothing. Well, go sit on the porch with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just let them know you care for them. Bring them some meal, whatever it is. Like, just the practical thing. You don't got to say a lot of words. But
Yep.
when when somebody loves you,
Yeah.
and that's not that hard. And so just being brave enough to go do that stuff, is what being men is about. So thank you for sharing your story. Appreciate you so much. And maybe we'll chat again sometime soon and just continue to see how you're doing on your journey.
Yeah. Appreciate the time, Nate. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and pumped for what your ministry and everything you're doing, and thankful for that. So God bless you on your
All
journey
right.
as well.
Hey guys, thanks so much for being here today and listening to the show. Please be sure to head over to the website at getinthefight.club. And before you go, if you haven't already, please subscribe, click the like button, and leave us a positive 5-star review. It makes a huge difference whenever you do. Have a great day. Go get in the fight.